everybody. Welcome to the Miesha Tate Show. If you're wondering, yes, I heard you. And the overwhelming response was you wanted to know more about me and my MMA career. Since this really isn't an MMA-based podcast for the most part, I decided that I was going to do a question-answer type podcast probably at least once a month. So I went ahead and submitted that on my Facebook. I wrote down your guys' questions and I answered as many as I could in this episode. Of course, I couldn't get to all of them. So if I didn't get to your question, or if there's a question that you are inspired to ask after listening to this, then write it down and be on the lookout, either my Facebook fan page or my Instagram. I will be asking you to submit your questions and I will be answering those once a month. All right, time for me to answer some questions. All right, question numero uno from Christopher says, since you're the champion now, do you think you should get paid the big money that other fighters get? The pay scale seems to not have any rhyme or reason. It's all over the place. Do you think there should be a standardized pay system? Well, I think that all the champions get paid pretty well in the UFC. And now that I'm the champion, I'm excited to see definitely what comes next. And as far as being a standardized pay system, I feel like that's really difficult to calculate. And I think that the UFC has tried to do that as far as maybe the Reebok system and kind of basing it off of ranking. But I feel like in any entertainment industry, there's so much that goes into draw and ranking. So there's ability, obviously there's the sport side of it, and then there's the interest side of it. And as mixed martial artists, as entertainers as we are, but we're also professional athletes, there's a lot that goes into deciding that. So I guess if I was to design a perfect world, it would be somewhere in between the ranking and also the draw. So there would have to be a way to kind of calculate someone's draw, to calculate ticket sales, how much media are they doing? What are they putting into this sport? So that's kind of a difficult question. Okay, on to the next question. Terry is asking, says, what has been your progress and your progression since your fight with Ronda your first fight with Ronda, and how will you strategize it to be different this time around? Well, the first time that I fought Ronda was in Strikeforce, and we just did not get along kind of from the very get-go. We just saw differently, and I went into that fight very, very emotional, and I feel like that was a mistake. I don't think I'm a very emotional fighter. I don't like to fight necessarily with a lot of emotion, in the sense that I like to be smart about myself. I like to be calculated. I like to go in there and have precision and accuracy and be able to really be myself in there. Just let myself go. Let myself be that fighter and kind of tap into that energy system. And I feel like if I'm over emotional, it can be a bad thing, because then I'm not thinking. I'm just kind of running off of this sort of red light. I'm just seeing red, and I'm emotional, I'm upset, I'm angry, and I don't feel like I fight as well like that. So then we move on to the second fight, and I had to record a whole season with Ronda with her middle finger in my face for however long, and I just think that I put it out of my mind to deal with it, and I just kind of put her out of sight, out of mind. Even though I was dealing with it on a daily basis, I had to develop a system to just kind of deal with it. And then I told myself, I'm not going to change who I am. I'm going to be the same person when I walk into the room as when she's into the room. So I went into that with that mentality, and that kind of, I feel like, caused me to be a little bit flat in that fight, because it was such a long process and such a daily thing, and so long and so much build up to that fight, that it kind of just caused me to feel a little bit drained by the time the fight rolled around. And I think I fought a little bit flat the second time around. So it's always a learning experience. Every fight is different. Every fight teaches you things about yourself, and especially losses. So, I'm really grateful that I have the losses that I do, because I think that is what has led me to the road of victory and eventually capturing a championship. So, those were great learning experiences. And I think I learned really how to balance myself out and how to tap into the right energy system. So here I am. Okay. Next question from Kate. says, I think you've always been kind of underestimated by a lot of people and by the UFC. How does it feel to finally have gotten that gold? You've been working so hard for it. Well, it feels really good, Kate. And it's like a dream come true. It's just, I don't know. I mean, whatever your dream is, whatever could be the best case scenario for you, I guess it's kind of like winning the lottery. Like, could you imagine that? Like, I'm sure everyone fantasizes about that. Wouldn't that be great to win that $60 million or whatever it is, whatever amount of money that would change your life forever? That dream. Just imagine putting so much work behind something like that. You know, winning the lottery is an off chance of something great happening that you don't really expect to happen. But if you can kind of translate it over into what I've been doing for 10 years, actually, this month, March, marks my 10-year anniversary in the sport. I had my very first amateur fight. I think it was March 25th, if I remember correctly. And I captured the UFC women's bantamweight title March 5th of 2016. So 10 years before that, March of 2006 was my first amateur fight. So this has been a crazy journey. This has been a lot of work. This has been a lot of trial and error. And mind you, back in early 2006, there was no dream of ever being a part of the UFC. It's not even realistic to say that it was far-fetched. I mean, this was just not even existent. I mean, people scoffed at the idea of women's MMA ever going anywhere, and it was hard to get fights. We were literally fighting for breadcrumbs. My first 6 fights were for free, and after that was just pennies on the dollar. So it's been a crazy journey, and there's been so much that I've learned about myself in this process. And just really, I think the thing that I walk away from when all is said and done at night, when I go to sleep, I just know that I'm a stronger woman for having done this sport. I think that I'm a stronger person for everything that I've been through, because this sport has pushed me beyond what I ever thought I was capable of. And I just had to accept that. That's what it really boils down to. I had to accept that I was willing to be broken and made again. And I was going to pick the pieces up when I needed to, and I was going to put myself back together, and I was going to get back on that horse, and I was going to go again, and I was going to try again and again and again until, that just wasn't an option anymore. Okay. Next question from Daniel. It says, looking back at your long, almost 10-year journey, which we just talked about, to the championship, is there something you would have done differently? Does it feel different having won the title from Holly rather than that bully Ronda? Again, those are your words, Daniel. So, no, not necessarily. So when I got into this sport 10 years ago, a whole decade ago, I got into it because I'm a competitor. I wrestled on the boys team in high school for 4 years, was the only female consistently in there. And I fell in love with the challenge of the sport. I fell in love with how difficult it was, how challenging it was in every facet of my being. It was hard. It was hard, and people wanted me to quit. They didn't want to see me succeed. And, I found that motivating. So, when I found mixed martial arts in college at age 19, I didn't really see myself doing it for a future. Obviously, I was going to college. I thought at the time, I hadn't picked a major yet, so it's my first year. I thought at the time maybe I wanted to major in foreign language or psychology or possibly exercise and science. But I was trying to find something that made sense to pay for going to school for that long and be in debt when I graduated. And so I hadn't decided, but I did not at all expect that my life would be thrown a curveball and I would find mixed martial arts. So my friend, Rosalia, my parents put me in an all girls dorm, of course, like that's going to protect me in some way, but they felt better about it. So anyways, they put me in an all girls dorm, and my next door neighbor her name was Rosalia Watson, and she was into karate, and she found this mixed martial arts program at the college that was run by a few local students, and she went to it without me the first time because she tried to get me to go, and I just said, no way. There's just no way. I'm just not interested in that. I don't want to wear the karate suit. There's no wushu kung fu that's going to magically appear out of me. I was like, I'm a wrestler, and that just doesn't sound interesting to me. Mind you, I had no idea what the UFC was. I'd never seen it before. My family didn't watch it at the time. I didn't have older brothers to like pick on me that I was raised with and introduce me to the sport that way. So I just didn't know what it was. And it sounded kind of unappealing, to be quite honest, as a female. She's like, I'm just really not interested in that. So anyway, she goes to the class. And she comes back the next day and tells me I have to go, and basically twists my arm. I'm like, fine, I'll humor you. I'll go. Well, I went, and it was incredible. Actually, I learned, I think my first day, I probably learned like a triangle choke and an arm bar, which was really weird for me being on my back as a wrestler, but it intrigued me because it was something I'd never done before. And I realized that there was an awesome transition to leverage and using jujitsu for leverage and self-defense. I thought this was amazing for women, particularly. And the fact that I had a wrestling background, it kind of came to me, it was foreign, but it was like speaking a similar language. And the fact that it happened on the ground and it was a contact sport, and I was intrigued. I was like, this is a whole new world. I think I can elevate my wrestling game. And so I was training there, and I got invited to watch my first live MMA event, which was an amateur event. And some of the people that had been training at the club sport were actually fighting at that event. And Brian Caraway, who's my now boyfriend, was one of the people running the club. He was a senior at the time. Him and Tommy Truex put the club together and taught. And their idea was to recruit local talent. So they were essentially scouting, but they didn't really expect me to wander in there and eventually want to fight. So when I wandered in there, I told them right away, I don't want to get punched in the face at all. And, I was like, I don't want to get punched in the face. I'm interested in learning this, jujitsu, whatever this is, because I wrestled in high school. So I explained my situation. Long story short, I got invited to this MMA event, and I watched it live for the first time. And Brian had a kickboxing bout on it, if I remember correctly, because he was already actually fighting professionally at that time. So I watched, and it was incredible. It was the coolest thing I'd ever seen. And I just had no idea what it was. And I was so misplaced in my mistrust for the sport by my ignorance, like not knowing what it was. And then I watched it, and I was like, whoa, this is incredible. This is amazing. I was like, and surely if these guys can do that, if that's what this sport is, I can do that. And my blood was pumping, and I was just into the moment. And then, the stars aligned. The ref who had been reffing the fight card, who was friends with the people putting on the promoters of this fight card, he got onto the microphone to promote his own show, which was happening like 3 weeks later in Wenatchee, Washington. So I'm in Yakima, Washington, by the way. And I went to Central Washington University in Ellensburg. And I went to Washington to Yakima to watch these fights. And so he begins promoting his own show in 3 weeks. And he says it's an all-female fight card. And I kind of was like my ears kind of perked up, like, wait, what? They have all-female fight cards? This is crazy. Obviously, it was hard for him to match fights and put things together, because he said on the microphone, he's like, if there's anyone in the audience that's interested in fighting on my card, any females, please make your way down and give me your information. So without knowing anything whatsoever besides what I just watched about this sport and a basic triangle choke, I made my way down there and I gave him my information. And from there, that's how I got my start in fighting. And 3 weeks later, I had my first fight against Liz Posner, and that was a crazy story, but I will save that for another time. So to get back to the original question, does it feel different to have won the title from Holly rather than Ronda? Well, not really, because when I got into this sport, I got into it, like I said, as a competitor, and my goal was to be the best that I could be. And eventually that dream grew into something that 10 years ago I couldn't have even fathomed possible. I just was taking it one step at a time and dreaming and pursuing and going and pushing and not taking no for an answer, going from these local small promotions to Hook and Shoot with Bodog, which was really the first organization that kind of promoted women's mixed martial arts and tried to give us a platform. Then I moved on to Strikeforce, and I was their longest signed female to Strikeforce. And then from Strikeforce, I went to the UFC, obviously. So I captured my first world title in Strikeforce against Marloes Kunin. I lost that to Ronda. Then we went over to the UFC, and it's been, I want to say, coming up on 3 years or so that we've been fighting in the UFC. And so my goal essentially was to be the best, and it was not to beat my arch nemesis. It wasn't to fight people I don't like. I don't fight because I'm angry. I fight because I am an athlete and I'm competitive. So sometimes I feel like there's this misconception that you must be angry or pissed off to fight. Well, for me, it's quite the contrary. I just like to be focused, and winning the world title either way is an amazing feeling, an amazing accomplishment. Now, that's not to say that I don't want to fight Ronda again, because I do. I definitely want the chance to avenge those fights to her before, but winning a world title is a goal in its own, and it doesn't matter who that comes from or who I fight to get that, because it just says so much. It signifies so much. Okay. Next question from Andy. It says, "Hey Miesha, my question is, how did it make you feel when Dana White made comments about you possibly hanging it up when you're only in your 20s, champ?" Well, that was an interesting period with the UFC. I have to take some responsibility because I was being kind of pissy, to be honest. And at the end of the day, I'm still a female. I'm still a woman. I get pissed off and I get emotionally charged, and I say things sometimes in the heat of the moment. The difference is that the whole world is listening, and there's press to capture that and make their headlines off of it. So, I said some things out of frustration, which, obviously anyone could see why I would be frustrated. I won 4 straight fights in a row. I was told, from my understanding, that I was going to be next for the title shot. And, then I find out, from Good Morning America, Ronda making an announcement that I was not going to be next, that Holly Holm would be next. And I was frustrated, to say the least. And rather than coming to the UFC and talking to them about it, I just kind of flew off the handle a little bit. And, I even made a comment at one point, feeling like in desperation that it may be time for me to consider hanging it up, not because I feel like I'm not competitive, not because I don't want to fight, but because I feel like the most important opportunity in my life to be the world champion was on my bucket list as a must do. It was the most important thing to me. It was what drives me every single day to go to the gym multiple times a day, to work my butt off. And when I didn't feel like that was an opportunity for me anymore, that was really hard for me to stomach. And I kind of jumped to conclusions that, well, if I'm not going to get this title shot now, that must mean I'm never going to get this title shot. And that stung a bit, and I kind of took it to heart. And I questioned for a moment what I was going to do in this sport then. Like, what was I fighting for, if not to be the best in the world? And that's kind of where that emotion came from and those statements came from. And then I think Dana kind of fired back, saying like, well, if she's seriously contemplating retirement, then she should probably just do it, because I think most of the time when people contemplate retirement, it's because they feel like they don't have it anymore. And that's a necessary time to probably walk away from the sport. But with that being said, with no communication between the UFC and myself in that situation, I think it was misinterpreted a little bit about where I really stood and why I was saying those things, and then why he said it back. So I hope that answers your question. Okay, the next question is from Josh. It says, "You're a fighter that I've watched and been a fan of for quite some time. I've watched you succeed and I've watched you fail. Your heart is unmatched, in my opinion." He said, "What drives you, and what advice would you give to those coming off of a loss?" Well, I say what drives me is this sick, deep-seated addiction to this sport. And it is addicting because it can so quickly take you to the top of that mountain where it's the most beautiful place in the world. and it can turn right around and knock you right on your butt, and you feel like you're buried under that mountain, essentially. So it's such a strange feeling in that there's so many highs and so many lows. So that drives me to get to those highs, because there's nothing I've ever felt in my life that's so rewarding as when I put so much into the sport, so much into it, and I get something back out of it. That is addicting for me. And I feel like I have to keep going. I have to keep improving. I've got to keep giving it everything that I have. And I've got to do this while I can, because I've always had that perception that nothing lasts forever. And I realize that this is just a moment in time, that I'm not going to be able to be the top of the world forever. So it's a window of time, a window of opportunity. I've already put a decade into this sport, and I have to find ways to reinvent this love for the sport, because it does get hard at times. It gets trying at times. But to give advice for the second part of the question, for someone coming off of a loss, is that you have to be honest with yourself first. You have to accept it. You have to break it down and say, this is what I did wrong. Now, how can I, once you get over that, and it's going to take a couple days or a week or sometimes more, I've had it take longer. You understand that this is going to take time to get over. If it was important to you, anyways, this is going to take time to let this wound heal. But as wounds do heal, it will heal with time. So I kind of look at it with the mentality that, yes, it's going to hurt. Yes, it's going to sting, but I will get through this, and I will be better for it. And that's just the mentality. If you really want to be the best, and if you really want to get through those losses and those hard times, you have to understand that losses can make you better if you let them. If you walk away from this and you have learned something that can make you better, then that's great, because winning is awesome. Winning is great. It's easy. It's amazing. And when I say easy, I mean that, like, once you've won, everything is just great. Everybody loves you. You're on this high, and it's amazing. It's great. The world's perfect. And you think sometimes maybe that you are perfect as an athlete. Like, why? I keep winning. I'm doing great. I must not be doing anything wrong. But when you lose and someone beats you, you have to take a step back and say, okay, here is my room for improvement. This is where I can get better. And that's just you just have to look at it that way. There's always a way to look at the glass half full or half empty. And if you choose to look at it half empty, then it's going to be a long road in this sport. And this sport honestly may not be for you, because you're going to be depressed a lot of the time. But if you can take your loss, accept that, and look at the glass half full, that you will learn and become better and stronger for it the next time, then you have room for growth. Okay, the next question is from Neil, and it says, "Hey Miesha, first of all, congratulations on your win against Holly Holm." Thank you. A top-level fighter with an impeccable previous record, so you've made a big statement by beating her, and of course, you're now a world champion. He goes on to say, I always believed that you would beat Holm due to your superior grappling, and I love watching BJJ fighters, and it's an art in itself. And my question is around this. Okay. Neil, your question is, would you just like to know who, I'm sorry, I'm butchering this. He would just like to know who you learned your grappling from. So, and he's saying, did you study BJJ? Or is this a particular martial art you excelled in before going into mixed martial arts? Well, as I mentioned before, I did wrestle. Now, when I say I wrestled for 4 years, mind you, I just wrestled in school season, which is about 2.5 to 3 months long. Then I had the rest of the year off, because I didn't know at that age, 15 to 18, how I could wrestle outside the school. And my parents didn't have any, it's not like I came from a wrestling family. They didn't know. I didn't do freestyle. I didn't do out of season competition or anything like that. So I literally lived to wrestle, for the wrestling season. So I did other sports around the year, but I lived for wrestling. And as far as who I learned my grappling from, I learned all of my grappling pretty much in its entirety from Brian Caraway. And I felt like I connected with him so well because he was a former wrestler too. So he has a different style. It's not really a play off of your back kind of jiu-jitsu game, although he has some really nasty tricks from there as well. I'm telling you, he is like a walking encyclopedia. I could sit for hours on end and pick his brain and learn so much. His grappling knowledge is unbelievable to me, and I absolutely love working with him. But literally, I'm telling you, from the day one I stepped my foot on the mat to learn something other than wrestling, it was Brian. He was the first person who taught me the first thing that I ever learned about mixed martial arts and jiu-jitsu and the grappling aspect of it. And he has sort of a style I would describe as catch wrestling. So it's more of a top game, which I prefer for MMA to be on top. Obviously, like I said, there's some really great things that we've learned from our back, and, so he has a great guard and there's things there, but I feel like catch wrestling transitions better into MMA because it's all of the submissions combined with ground and pound, usually taking place from the top position. And I just think in MMA, that's just better overall. So, it's been a long journey, but Brian has been there the entire way. And, I would feel very comfortable saying 90% of my ground game came from Brian Caraway. Okay. Next question. Rich is asking me, he says, after the UFC, announced that Holm was getting the next title shot at Rousey, I could only imagine what you were thinking and going through. I read that you were considering retirement. Just want to know what you did to go through all that and any coping skills other than the gym. What was your mindset to taking the next step in the cage, or if there was any at the time, any emotions? Well, yeah, obviously I was very emotional at the time. And I mean, it's kind of like, it would be, I guess, maybe let me draw a scenario. So let's say you're with someone for an extended period of time and you think that they're the one for you, right? And they break up with you and they break your heart. And in that moment in time, you're kind of crazy because you think that this is the one, this is the opportunity, this is meant to be, and you've got to fight with it for every fiber of your being. And even though at times you get carried away and you're like, I've got to fight for this, but you're like, well, maybe fine, it is what it is. You're going through all these emotions. And I guess that's kind of what it was. I felt like maybe that mixed martial arts was kind of breaking up with me in a sense that this was meant to be, and I had to fight for it. And I was emotional at the time. I said some things that were not how I necessarily really felt, but I was frustrated with the situation. So I didn't think that I would be able to forgive myself if I didn't try, because I didn't want to leave this sport having any doubt that I didn't give it everything I have. And I thought, if I just fight another fight, it's not what I want, but at least if I have to walk away from the sport, I can say that I gave it everything I had. So I was going to fight until I felt like I couldn't fight anymore. And that was it. I just kind of accepted what was. There's some things in life that are in your control and some things that are not. And I was hopeful that something would change, that I would get an opportunity one way or another. And if I just stayed positive about it, that maybe, just maybe, I would get that chance anyways, even though I felt that I deserved that shot at that time. Referring back to the girlfriend that broke up with you or the boyfriend that broke up with you and you thought that it was meant to be at that moment in time. And then what ends up happening is you meet someone later and that is really the person that you were meant to be with, or that perfect opportunity. So I'm kind of drawing this imagery essentially when I got the title shot and it was actually meant to be and it was perfect and everything happened the way that it was really meant to happen. And it kind of erased that situation that ever happened before, because sometimes things just happen for a reason and you can't explain it. And as much as in the moment you think that it's all wrong, sometimes it really is right. And I'm really glad that I had that mindset to just prepare for the next fight, regardless of what was going to happen, because that allowed me to be ready for the title fight that came unexpectedly against Holly. Now, Felipe, I was asking, he says, Miesha, would you be willing to fight Gina Carano for the title? It's a matchup I've always wanted to see. That's if she decided to come back. Yes, that is a big if. And honestly, I feel like as the champion, my job is to fight whoever is next. And it's not really my decision, but I do know I'm going to sit down with my management, Kevin Harvick Incorporated, and we're going to talk, and we're going to talk to the UFC, and we're going to see what is next. You know, I'm new to this, being a champion, so I really can't pretend that I know everything about it, but I'm trying to learn, and my life has changed a lot since becoming the champ. I've had a lot going on. I've barely had a second to breathe, but I am absolutely loving it. And you know, if Gina did decide to make a comeback and that became an option, then absolutely I would be interested in that fight. I think it would be an amazing fight. But there's also a lot of amazing girls that are currently fighting that could make great number one contenders. So I just kind of have to keep my mind open and realize that I could be fighting anyone at any time, and I have to stay ready. That is my job as the champion, and I plan on doing it exceptionally well. Okay, Mark. On to Mark. Mark's question is, it says, I've been a fan of yours for years, since you won the Strikeforce title, and I was watching you and Gina Carano before I ever heard of Miss Ronda Rousey. My question is, what are your feelings about so many people crediting her for women's MMA, knowing the long road you've taken? That's always bothered me. Thanks, and congratulations again. Well, Mark, it has been a very long road for me, and there's a lot of underlying work that maybe sometimes the general public doesn't see, because it's not promoted. It's not really talked about. It's kind of like when you go to a theater and you watch a movie and you see that the director is credited, and then they kind of like quickly flash through, you know, some of the people that did a lot of the work. I mean, a lot of it to make it ever happen, you know, the special effects and the filming and all those things. Those people get like a 2-second recognition, which most people don't even catch. I think it's kind of like that, if I could draw an analogy in that sense, that there's parts of my career that were absolutely instrumental in the development of women's mixed martial arts and getting it to where it's at today, but it's just very low lighted in the overall picture. But it doesn't discourage me, because I know what I did. I know what I've put into it. And at the end of the day, I don't need the whole world to recognize that. I mean, I'm the one who goes to bed at night, and I can look at myself in the mirror and say, this is what I did do. This is what I didn't do. And at the end of the day, that's really what matters, is that I can be accountable with myself, and I can be honest with myself and say, hey, you had a big part to do with this. You were the one of two people that fought Ronda for the Strikeforce title, and that's what caught the attention of the UFC, and that's why the UFC is where it is today. Now, if Ronda didn't have someone to step into the cage with, it could have been a different story. You know, the UFC maybe never would have saw that, and we would have missed that window of opportunity. Who knows? Or maybe she would have stepped into the octagon with someone else who wasn't going to put up the fight that I put, and potentially the UFC wouldn't have had interest in that, you know, promoting women's mixed martial arts and taking us to the next level. I don't know for sure. I just know that I showed up to every fight and I tried my best, and it's been a long road. And there was a time when women's mixed martial arts was so small, so minuscule in this world, and so just kind of touted at and just scoffed at in a way that it feels really, really good to have come from where I came from to where I am now, because it gives me an entirely different perspective. You know, I didn't grow up well off. There was a time early in my childhood when we were very, very poor. I mean, it's so poor that our electricity was turned off at times. And I remember the bathrooms being frozen over because it was so cold. I grew up in Washington State. It was so cold that we didn't have enough heat in the house to thaw the water in the toilets. So there has been hardships in my life that have forged me into having a strong character. And I think fighting and becoming a mixed martial artist so early on, 19 years old was my first fight. And people didn't care. Nobody cared about it. I wasn't doing it because I saw a future in it necessarily. I was doing it because I loved it. I was literally 100% guided by passion and no other motivation. And that is truly the struggle, is to keep the passion, because when money gets involved, when fans get involved, when politics get involved, when things bigger than you get involved in your passion, sometimes it's hard to separate it all. And that has been the struggle, is to keep that passion alive. It's just like when you have a marriage or something like that, to keep the passion between the marriage. It's the same thing. It's like having a relationship. I have a relationship with mixed martial arts, and there's times when I hate it and I'm frustrated and I'm storming off the mat because I'm not doing as well as I was hoping to do. And I'm frustrated for 3 days at my performance because I'm hard on myself. But there's other times, like winning a world title or winning a contender fight, or winning any fight, or making even headway into the strike force and then making headway into the UFC. Those are moments. Those are moments in time that give you so much back that it just makes it worth it. So I hope that answered your question. And I am also doing my best to answer as many questions as I can, but obviously there's a lot of questions. So I won't be able to get to all of them, but I plan on doing this more often. I'm going to aim to do kind of a Q&A style once a month. So with that being said, I'm going to do my best to answer the majority of the questions today. Next question is from Robert. Robert says, so now that you've become the champion, will you plan on doing some movies? Well, Robert, as you may or may not know, I filmed a movie called Fight Valley over this last summer. And I'll be honest with you, I did not think that I would take to acting or really like it. When people had asked me before, do you want to do movies? I was like, Now, mind you, this is before I did my first movie, but I was like, I just don't know. I don't know if it's for me. I don't think I would be a good actress. I kind of feel like that would be a little bit out of my element, and I don't know if I would be able to deliver very well. Now, I still don't know if I delivered very well. I have yet to watch the footage, but I will tell you that when I was filming Fight Valley, it was completely different than what I thought it was going to be. And I actually really, really enjoyed it. And I think it's because it challenged me in an entirely different way. And I kind of fell in love with it a little bit, to be honest. I really enjoyed acting. I took some acting classes while I was there, and it was fun for me. And it was hard, but pushed me in a different direction and a totally different perspective than I had been pushed before. So I kind of feel like I enjoy that, and that usually pulls the most out of me. It pulls the best out of me. So with that being said, I hope that I get some more opportunities to do things like that, because like I said, it was a lot of fun. It was different than I expected, and I definitely enjoyed it. So when that movie comes out, and I think it's anticipated for a summer release. When that comes out, it also features Chris Cyborg and Holly Holm. We're also all in that. So it'll be interesting to see it. I'm excited to see it. And I feel like I have a lot to learn, and that I can definitely become a much better actress, because I went into that with little to no experience. Like I said, I was taking acting lessons on set. I didn't know. So I hope that I have a lot of room for improvement, because it's something that I definitely discovered that I have a passion for. All right. Question from Lordian, and I hope that I'm saying his name right. It's Lordian. So I'm assuming it's pronounced Lordian. He says, first of all, congratulations not only on your Saturday victory, but on your whole career as well. Amazing. So I have a 2-part question. You obviously look like a totally different and much improved fighter since your last fight versus Ronda. Besides the obvious striking game, in your estimation, what do you think has been the biggest change you have gone through since that fight that may not necessarily be technique related? So let me answer that question first. I think I've gone through a lot since that fight, but I really feel like what's molded me into the fighter that I am today is being able to pick myself up from losses. I feel like life will knock you down, and it will surely kick you while you're down sometimes. And you have to find the strength within yourself to get back up and to try again. And losing to Ronda in the UFC was one of the hardest things I've ever had to deal with. And to be honest, it was very, very, very difficult. But I knew that I was destined for a greater purpose. And I knew that anything that was thrown at me that I could overcome, that there was something I could do to be better from it. And so I think a huge difference that's not necessarily technique related is that I learned how to balance my mental and emotional state much, much, much better. I've learned a lot about myself as an athlete, and I feel like some fights I've been way too emotional in, and other fights I've been a little bit flat because I let myself get drained. So there's things and techniques that I have learned along the way to be able to cope with different situations inside the sport, because every fight is different. Every fighter presents different challenges, and each fight requires a different look of emotion. And sometimes it can be a bit overwhelming if you don't know how to cope with it. And anytime that you're preparing to fight for a title, there's just a lot going on. There's a lot of media coverage. There's a lot of fan interest, and that is awesome. It's wonderful. But the thing that people don't realize is there's no mixed martial arts 101. There's no course. There's no here's what to do. There's no guidelines. There's no book. There's no nothing. There's nothing out there that tells you this is how you deal with this kind of pressure. So it's something that you have to figure out yourself. And it's kind of a sink or swim situation in that some people are built to cope with it better than others. And some people have to learn as they go. And it's just interesting, honestly, how you could break it down to each fighter and each situation and each scenario, because there's really no two that are alike. So with that being said, it's a very unique situation each time, but I still feel like I have rounded myself out and balanced myself out and learned a lot about myself to be able to become a better fighter. And that's mental and emotional. I think that was the biggest thing. And I feel like the team that I'm with now, working with my team at Extreme Couture with Brian Caraway, Robert Follis, and my striking coach, Jimmy Gifford, they have made a world of difference in that playing field. Not only have they made me better technically, but they've made me just a more sound athlete. I just believe in myself more, and I'm more confident, and they've just instilled so many great tools in me, and I couldn't be more thankful for that. So next part of the question, and it says, when and if you face Ronda again, what will you do differently and or during the training camp to get a better result this time around versus her? Well, I hate to look too far ahead because I don't know exactly what is going to come next. And I like to focus definitely one fight at a time, but, I'm pushing myself to be a better fighter at all times. And, like I said, again, with the fight with Ronda the last time, I just felt like emotionally, mentally, I was kind of burnt out and I felt a little bit flat. And I just know that I can do better than that. I know that I am a better fighter than that. And I think that my striking skill set has rounded out so nicely. And I feel like I was able to display that a little bit March 5th in my movement, my head movement, my footwork, my accuracy, to be able to stand in there for the better part of 4 rounds with someone as accomplished as Holly is not an easy thing to do without her catching you. And I felt like there was nothing on the feet that surprised me, nothing that I wasn't prepared for. And I feel like that just says a lot. So I've made a lot of evolution in that technical part of my game. And I think that's a huge piece for anyone that I fight, but, potentially particularly Rousey. Question from Abdul. Why do you think there is so much hate on Brian? Do you ever feel guilty for all the hate Brian receives? What do you think of the approach of some of the other guys like A. Sterling by disrespecting you? How many fights is Brian, in your opinion, from a title shot? Well, I think there's a lot of hate on Brian, for one, because he's dating me. Do I ever feel guilty for it? I mean, I feel bad because I definitely don't feel like it's warranted or deserved. Brian is a very wear his emotions on his sleeve kind of person. He's a very passionate person. He's a very goal-driven person, and he speaks his mind. And the thing is when you speak your mind in your own home and your friends are around you, it becomes at worst, it becomes a comfortable debate and people express their feelings, and it's a safe atmosphere. When you speak your mind publicly and there's people who do not know who you are and they're just judging you on the headlines that the media is choosing to put out there on you, that's an entirely different thing. And I feel like people get this perception of Brian that is really misinterpreted. So I do feel bad in some ways, but I mean, we do our best to combat it, and people are going to think what they want to think. I happen to think that Brian is an amazing person, amazing man, and I know for sure that you wouldn't probably know who I was if it wasn't for Brian. So all that hate, you've got to stop and think twice that this is the man that has made me into the fighter that I am today, so that you even care about watching me fight. So, he knows that, I know that, and we just try to focus on that. We try to stay positive because there's always going to be haters. There's always going to be people who want to try to bring you down because they can't accomplish what you have accomplished. So they want to try to bring you down to their level. And, the goal is to not stoop to that level. As far as other guys disrespecting me, I think that's very childish, and, I don't appreciate it. Let's see, how many fights is Brian? Oh, I think Brian's one fight away from a title shot. I think that potentially after beating Eddie Wineland, he was 5th in the world. He could have potentially been up as a candidate, as a contender at that time, but, it's been a little bit longer of a layoff than we wanted. And, I think that he wins this next fight against a good, hopefully a good, opponent, then, we will see what's next. But I think that definitely could be some room for argument that he would be a top contender at that point. Question from Matt. Did you ever think at any point that you weren't able to win? So he's obviously talking about March 5th against Holly. He said, congratulations. It was an awesome fight. You're a legend. Thank you, Matt. Going into that 5th round, I felt like the odds were slowly stacking against me every second that went by, because Holly is so good at touching and moving and being elusive as a fighter. I didn't feel in danger that I was going to be finished at any point, but I thought that the clock was my worst enemy at that point, because I felt like, I feel like sometimes when fighters don't engage that much, it's a little bit more difficult to get a fight going. And it was a very technical match on the feet. And obviously Holly's one of the most technical in the world. So she was outpointing me by a little bit. It wasn't a blowout. It wasn't a devastating, striking clinic that she was putting on me, but she was edging me. She would, touch me with this or put a push kick that would knock me back 3 steps and, look really great to the judges. But at the end of the day, I thought I have 5 minutes to get this done and I can do it. I just have to create the opportunity, because she wasn't giving anything to me. She was touching and moving and making it very difficult to grab a hold of her or to get her down or to even hit her back, So I realized that I was fighting the clock at that point more than anything, and that I had to force an opportunity because it wasn't just going to be handed to me. So I went out there and thought, this is my round to get it done. And that's it. Made up my mind. Next question from Carl. How did you prepare for this fight? I mean, did you change anything that you had previously done going into this, or did you stick to what you had done before? Because to me, it looks like you've adapted and obviously gotten stronger. Well, I have gotten stronger. I didn't change anything particularly in this fight, obviously, other than training partners giving me a little bit more of a specific look. I trained with the same coaches, Brian Caraway, Robert Follish, Jimmy Gifford, and I have my striking coach is Jimmy Gifford. My strength and conditioning coach, Reggie Hobson, has been involved in my last 2 training camps. So this one and the one before that. And I feel like I've gotten stronger. My stamina has built. My explosivity has built. So I am becoming a better athlete. But that is not something that was new to this training camp. It was something that I implemented in the last training camp, and I really liked it, so I continued it for this camp. Alrighty, and that is a wrap for the Miesha Tate show today. Now remember, if I did not get to your question, be on the lookout, because I'm going to do this once a month. So it will be on my Facebook fan page or my Instagram. I will ask you to submit your questions. So if I didn't get to them today, or you have a brand new, brilliant question that crossed your mind today, write it down, keep it in mind. And you can also find the links to the